Hello, welcome to the conversation here on News Central Television. This is the program where we bring you up to speed with all the political happenings on the African continent. I am Gbenga Aborowa.
And I am Rita Omodia. Now, today on the conversation, we'll be looking into the Kenya politics as the Supreme Court begins the hearing of the elections petition. We'll also be discussing developments in South Africa as President Cyril Ramaphosa again refused to answer parliamentary questions about the theft on his Limpopo farm. He has also appointed National Anti-Corruption Advisory Council. These are two very important topics around the political scene in the African continent, looking at the Kenya elections, and now in South Africa, looking at President Cyril Ramaphosa's parliamentary debacle, so to say.
Yes, and of course here in Nigeria, politicians are consulting, they're traveling and going up towards 2023. And I have to say, welcome back, Rita. How was your vacation?
So, vacation indeed. I think all I would say is health is wealth,
yes,
basically.
Health is wealth indeed. Glad to have you back.
Thank you.
We have quite a lot to look forward to today. We begin in the Republic of South Africa, where President Cyril Ramaphosa has appointed members of a National Anti-Corruption Advisory Council. The council will advise the president on matters related to fighting corruption in line with the National Anti-Corruption Strategy 2020 to 2030. The council would also provide advisory input on matters related to government's comprehensive response to the recommendations of the Judicial Commission of Inquiry into allegations of state capture.
In other developments, President Cyril Ramaphosa's refusal to again answer parliamentary questions about the theft on his Limpopo farm has caused outrage among opposition parties in the National Assembly on Tuesday. They argued that Ramaphosa failed to provide a sound legal reason for not answering their questions. President Cyril Ramaphosa, however, said that he was not shirking accountability, but investigative processes must follow their course first. Now, joining us for this conversation, we have Dr. Ntsikelelo Breakfast, a political analyst from Port Elizabeth, South Africa. We also have Ongama and Mtimka, a political analyst based at Nelson Mandela University. Gentlemen, glad to have you join us on the conversation.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right, so I'll start with you, Dr. Breakfast. There's been a lot of controversy going on in South Africa. Now, this 9-member body, the Anti-Corruption Advisory Council, was first announced during the 2021 State of the Nation address, and now it has finally been put together. What's your take on the body and its mandate?
Yeah, I think we need to bear in mind that President Ramaphosa came into power on a ticket of good governance. So he came into power as a person who projected himself as someone who was taking a stand against corruption. But the challenge is that there have been few arrests that have been made, with the exception of, the ones that have happened, I think, on Monday, of prominent politicians. So some people argue that the past is still with us, in the sense that we have this history of the so-called state capture, which is the institutionalization of corruption, whereby a particular family behind closed doors was pulling the strings. But like I said, not a lot of people have been brought into book. No wonder he's trying his level best to intensify his efforts in terms of getting the job done in waging a war on corruption.
Now, Dr. Breakfast, in the past, President Ramaphosa has faced criticism for not following through on recommendations that were made by various investigating bodies and commissions on what to do to fight corruption. Others have questioned if, South Africa really needs another advisory body. What's your response to this skepticism and this line of commentary?
I think the criticism is valid because, for instance, you know as well as I do that we've had the so-called State Capture Commission, and there have been 3 reports that have been handed over to him. But of late, I've heard the president saying that no, he's going to pick and choose which findings he's going to implement, because some of those findings, they implicate members of the ruling party. So sometimes people feel like it's a waste of money to pop out huge amounts of money into these bodies while they don't bear fruit in terms of implementation.
So why do you think there's no political will to implement it? Is it politics, or does he not want to ruffle a few feathers? What's stopping him from implementing some of this report?
Everything has a context, and context is everything. We must bear in mind that one of the findings of the Zondo Commission was that the ruling party, the African National Congress, is also embroiled into corruption. The ANC was at the heart of state capture. Senior members of the ANC have been using the state machinery as a platform to dish out tenders and favors to their own henchmen in exchange for support. No wonder he doesn't want to rub some people in a wrong way. Furthermore, the ruling party is going to hold a national conference just around the corner. The president might stand as someone who wants to hold on to power again. So there are certain people who are doing the groundwork for him on the ground, and he doesn't want to rub them the wrong way.
Okay, Dr. Breakfast, aside from this lack of political will, let's still look at this body being created. We know that the South African Police Services Directorate for Priority Crime Investigations, also known as the Hawks, is specialized in targeting organized crime, corruption, and other serious crimes. Now, in what ways will the work of the anti-corruption advisory body differ from that of the Hawks? And do you think there's any guarantee there will be a difference in results?
Like I said, I mean, the rationale or the thinking behind is to intensify the efforts of the president in waging a war against the corruption. Because what had happened during the era of state capture is that the security apparatus were also captured. And we still have those remnants. No wonder, last year when that social conflict broke out in KwaZulu-Natal, some of the people who are aligned to former President Zuma refused to get the job done in terms of arresting some people, because former President Zuma still has henchmen within the state machinery. So you need to intensify the efforts in fighting against corruption. But I understand what you are saying. I think what you are implying is that are we not going to see a duplication of some sort, because there are other structures which are operational, which are meant to fight against corruption.
Exactly. Now, there's the National Prosecuting Agency, which is responsible for state prosecutions. And up until today, not a single person has been convicted for state capture. We've seen the 3 volumes of the Zondo Commission report, and we know the extent at which the South African economy and state was captured. And to think that no one has been arrested for this says a lot about crime fighting in South Africa. That's why some observers have said what is needed is not another council or commission, but handcuffs and more prisons and successful prosecution of those that have been indicted. What do you make of all of this?
No, I think you've hit the nail on the head on that score. I fully concur with you. But at the same time, I think that there have been very, very few arrests that have happened. Some people say that it's due to political pressure.
Now, arrest. Sorry to jump in, Dr. Breakfast. Arrests are very different from prosecutions. So, yes.
No, of course, sure. In fact, you are right, because some people even say that, the way people are arrested, they are arrested in a way that is choreographed, so that, their arrest can receive media coverage. But of course, the burden of proof rests with the state in terms of proving beyond reasonable doubt that someone is. So sometimes you find that some of the arrests, they are not aligned to the arguments that are presented in court in a way that is impressive. Some people, they walk away scot-free because there's no watertight argument against them.
Now, Dr. Breakfast, looking at this corruption allegations going on in South Africa, let's look at the fact that the president is the one establishing this anti-corruption advisory council among other corruption advisory councils that have been created, and the allegations of the Palafala fam going on. Now, the ANC says this structure of the step aside when there are corruption allegations. Do you think it would be right if Ramaphosa actually steps aside from creating this corruption advisory councils and allow an independent body do so?
The issue of Pala is not simplistic, nor is it straightforward. In as much as there is a case to answer in that regard by the president, because there are gaps in his argument in terms of what had happened. On the other hand, the person who instituted the charges against the president is a henchman of former President Zuma. And that begs the question as to what was the rationale behind the charges that he brought forward, or, behind the case that he opened against Ramaphosa, despite the fact that he has not been charged.
Yeah, but others, sorry to jump in here, Dr. Breakfast, others will say, don't prosecute the messenger, but look at the message itself, because this robbery that happened at the president's farm in Limpopo, and is also admitted to it. Yes.
No, of course, I fully concur with you. But what I'm saying is that there is more to this than meets the eye. It's not a straightforward thing. It's not simple. I mean, for instance, former President Zuma, alongside the EFF, they have joined forces to put pressure on the president to step aside or to be removed from the helm of power, because they see him as someone who's posing a threat to them. So there is that, bad blood between them. So those are the politics which are at play. That's why I'm saying that we need to be open-minded, not to say that the president must be exempted from being charged or.
But how are you, Dr. Breakfast? How are you inside an investigation panel where you are being investigated? I mean, while you're talking about being open-minded and while there's a lot of rational and political pressure, don't you think it's still indicting the president? I mean, they're investigating you and you're still creating a panel, an advisory council to investigate corruption. Don't you think it's a bit lopsided?
No, I understand what you're saying. You're talking about the conflict of interest. What I'm saying, you see, there have been other processes that have taken place in Parliament which are meant to hold the president accountable. For instance, there is a process of impeachment which is underway at the moment. So one of the provisions of that is to examine whether the president broke his oath of office or not. If he did that, then members of Parliament will vote against him and remove him. There's a constitutional provision for that. So there's a panel of experts which will be appointed, I think, before the end of this particular week. So that is underway. Then the other attempt in terms of holding him accountable is to basically pose a motion of no confidence against him. So I don't think that he's been let off the hook. He's not been held accountable, despite the fact that he didn't do what he should have done yesterday. He did not answer the question the way he should have. I understand that. But I'm saying that we also need to examine other complexities at play, because this is not a straightforward matter. There are politics at play. The President Ramaphosa does have political enemies, in my view, who would want to remove him from power. I don't know whether to distract him from fighting against corruption or what, not to say that he's clean even himself.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Breakfast. I'd like to bring in our second guest, Ongama Mtimka. He is with the Nelson Mandela University. A very warm welcome to you, Ongama. Thanks for joining us.
Good evening, Bapo, and to your listeners.
Now, Ongama, I want to follow up on where we left Dr. Breakfast, talking about this establishment of the anti-corruption advisory. So you have a situation where the President of the Republic has been indicted on, not declaring what happened, and the money that we're talking about, I mean, some have quoted millions of United States dollars in Forex. Quite serious allegations, and there's also the talks of, does he have the moral right and responsibility to go ahead and establish an institution, to establish an anti-corruption advisory when he himself has been indicted of corrupt practices and he hasn't even answered those questions? What do you make of all of this?
Yeah, so I think the debate in South Africa has mainly been around the issue of why another committee or council. The president has a lot of these commissions that he has set up during his term. And when I heard of it, I asked myself a question. Hasn't he heard of the Auditor General who audits government departments and state agencies, from national government departments to municipalities? And the Auditor General produces reports on the state of municipalities in the country with actions that are required to be taken by various players. Then we've got the National Treasury. The National Treasury ensures that it distributes the fiscus to municipalities and government departments. And what happens as part of its process, it's to receive financial reports and be able to take action, and sometimes has been able to withhold money and not disperse it to beneficiary municipalities or provinces when they are not addressing audit issues that are raised. Then you've got departments of cooperative governance and traditional affairs at a national level and provincial level who are supposed to play an oversight role over municipalities, particularly where most of the corruption is taking place. So my sense is that failures to lead are making the president to take shortcuts and creating an impression of action by these committees.
You also have the NPA and the Hawks, if I'm not mistaken.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So from a prosecutorial point of view, you've got the NPA and the Hawks, especially as well as the Special Investigating Unit, which has been authorized on a number of instances to investigate cases. And in fact, when there was scandal around the procurement of PPEs, it was the intervention of the SIU that resulted in some politicians, no less than the former Minister of Health, having to fall on his sword, along with the former presidential spokesperson, Kusela Diko, whose husband and her were accused of benefiting from PPE contracts in Gauteng. So the point I'm making is that the president has had this tendency of creating a super presidency for no reason. If these were mechanisms to help him improve his leadership capabilities over what is already existing institutions, it would be understood. Their efforts are actually duplicitous.
Okay, so Ongama, why exactly are these existing institutions not working? You've mentioned the fact that there have been a lot of corruption institutions. Why are they not working?
It's politics, and that's where the problem is. So the Auditor General is one of the well-run institutions in the country. It's produced reports on the state of municipalities. And in fact, it's through their work that we know that under President Cyril Ramaphosa, corruption did not improve but worsened, because municipalities are in a far worse state, despite the fact that President Cyril Ramaphosa has made some important gains as far as the party political reforms, which have resulted in some of the crooked politicians losing their offices and not being allowed to stand for office at a party level. So he's made the greatest gains at a party level. The institutions are working, but need better leadership in order for them to work a lot more. South Africans feel that a lot more politicians should be on the dock and answering to allegations of corruption, including the president, than we have seen. I'm excited that I think early this week, We saw the arrest of former chief executives of and chief financial officer of the state utility Transnet that operates the logistics, of South Africa. But we are aggrieved by the fact that politicians are still off the hook. It's them who are blocking the effectiveness of implementation of Auditor General reports on municipalities, because they make arrangements among themselves which protect them and the corrupt officials that are negatively reported on in those Auditor General reports.
Now, Ongama, what should be the number one priority of this new advisory council? Should it be government corruption, parliamentary corruption, corruption in politics, or the private sector? And are you confident that this new anti-corruption advisory body will help reduce incidences of graft in South Africa?
It's a pointless structure. We need the president to become an effective manager of the existing law enforcement institutions. What he needs to do is to make sure that the Minister of Justice manages the performance of the NPA, the SIU, the Hawks, as well as the work of the police in general. We also need to make sure that the ANC as the governing party has got more political will to deal with reports of corruption about their members. I'm happy that at a party political level, leading up to the December conference, they've created rules that are going to prevent, rogues from being elected into office. That's a good step, but we need them to take their role in oversight over municipalities a lot more seriously. And if their renewal efforts are going to amount to anything that's worth the respect of South Africans. So this new, committee is pointless, and they must produce, if anything they can do is to identify inefficiencies in the management of these organizations. And if they do their job properly, it will be very clear that political oversight over these institutions that are already existing is what...
When you say it's pointless, is it because they report to the president and they were not created as an act of parliament, so the president can, dissolve this commission at any time? Is that why you say it's pointless?
No, it's more from the perspective of, remember, these NPA and the others are departments and government institutions with an entire office structure from national.
So it's more like duplication of duties.
Not even. So when you create an advisory structure, you want to be advised, and my sense is that there is no better advice that these people can give, which substitutes the need for better management of the organizations that already exist.
Okay, Ongama, now looking at Ramaphosa, you talked about the National Conference of the ANC. Now, yesterday in Parliament, President Ramaphosa refused to answer questions related to his Phala farm robbery. Now, how do you think these allegations going on? I mean, we saw lots of incidences at the Parliament where the EFF opposition told Ramaphosa to step aside. We've seen other factions, even within the ANC, telling Ramaphosa to step aside. How do you think this will play out for Ramaphosa?
I think that in the African continent, we need a higher standard for leadership and higher expectations in terms of the integrity of politicians, such that if a scandal comes out, a president falls on their sword immediately. The scenes we saw in Parliament yesterday when grown-ups had to defend the indefensible. Senior MPs from the ANC had to defend the indefensible. It's very clear that this is scandalous, the Phala issue. The president's degree of care in terms of what he says suggests that where there is smoke, there is fire. So my sense is that the president has got to be accountable. I am of the strong view that he should actually resign, notwithstanding the fact that the person who came up with this scandal in the first place and reported it publicly and opened a case, is a known opponent of President Cyril Ramaphosa and a pro-Jacob Zuma person. Notwithstanding that, the defense of politicians against attacks on integrity should never be the intentions of those who attack them, but rather their personal integrity.
Now, Ongama, before we wrap this up, yesterday, President Ramaphosa refused to speak in Parliament, citing ongoing investigations. Does that hold water? And is there a timeline to this Falapala investigations? Why is it taking so much time?
You see, that's part of the challenge, because you've got to be very bold if you are the National Prosecuting Authority, you're the Hawks, and you must actually charge a sitting president. It's going to make it difficult. However, the South African system has shown its resilience in the multitudes of institutions that are there that can support democracy and hold parliamentarians or even the president accountable. So my hope here is that as the parliamentary process unfolds, the president is going to create a situation where he is in defiance of Parliament. And in fact, what saved him from that determination yesterday was the fact that Parliament ran out of time before he could be given a chance to respond to the allegations made by opposition MPs that he, in fact, had no legal or constitutional basis to refuse to answer the question. So when Parliament sits again and follows up on this issue, I think that the president will do well to give some answer that either confirms what happened and clarifies the role that he played. Otherwise, this one of saying he cannot speak because he's been advised not to is not going to hold water, because the opposition MPs went to great lengths to explain why the president could not use the defenses, such as, for example, that the sub judice, defense, because this matter is not before any court of law.
Okay.
All right. Thank you so much, Ongama, for joining us, Mtimka for joining us on the conversation. Also, thank Ntsikelelo Breakfast. He joined us earlier. Thank you so much for joining us on the conversation.
Thanks for your insight.
Thanks for having me.
And right now, we'll take a quick break. When we come back, we see two situations in Kenya where it's not over until it's over. The petitions have been put in place by the opposition candidate Raila Odinga to the Supreme Court. And there are a lot of things in store for what the Supreme Court has to say before they give their verdict. We'll have discussions on this after the break. Join us again.